my name is Erin Goggins and I wrote a lesson on community maps to address the theme of Map It. I'm a middle school technology teacher, but for this lesson I borrowed 20 second graders for just under 2 hours. This was because of my very particular and strict curriculum in the technology world. My lesson added on to a long-term geography project the class had been working on, where they were creating their own community maps using a large grid and sticky notes as buildings and streets. My activities added a legend and scale to that ongoing project, as well as getting students thinking about how to see differences in a community by looking at maps. I started with my activity concerning legends. We discussed common symbols and what they mean, and then the students were given laminated maps of their local community. With the maps laminated, students could trace the symbols that we were discussing, but then the maps could be used again later after they had been wiped off. Students then created their own symbols to go on their community maps, like cross skis for skiing hills or ice cream cones for ice cream shops. Students commented on how they could create legends on their maps where X marks the spot, and were very excited to come up with their own symbols and legends. Their curiosity and creativity really showed during this activity. The next activity, we focused on map scales. I pulled ideas from a lesson by National Geographic called Measuring Distances on a Map. We discussed what a map scale is, and then the students were given maps of their state from One Page Maps National Geographic's resource. I then pulled up the same map on the projector. Students compared the two and came to the conclusion that the maps were the same, but the one on the projector was larger. Students were then given rulers and told to focus on the scale at the top left corner. Students came to the conclusion that although the scale on the projector was larger, both scales measured the same distance on their respective maps. Students then chose 3 routes to measure and worked individually or in pairs with their rulers and the scales to figure out the distance from city to city. Students felt empowered when they figured out the answer, and when done, they tried to find the answers to different routes and shared their findings with others. For our final activity in the lesson, the class filled out a Venn diagram comparing their small rural mountain town community to New York City. Using street and satellite view on interactive maps, students made inferences about what they noticed on the maps and came to conclusions about the communities. Students noticed things like how the number of streets and buildings meant more or less people, or how the amount of blue and green seen on the map meant more or less open space. They used their powers in observation and prior knowledge about maps to create thoughtful and knowledgeable inferences about the differences in the community. My lesson addressed regional and local scales by looking at state and local maps. We also compared 2 different communities and noticed the similarities and differences between them. We considered different perspectives by looking at street and satellite views of maps and noticing the differences between those. Students noticed intersections between the human and natural world when they saw large amounts of green spaces as compared to multiple buildings. In their own maps, they were sure to add in natural space because they did not like the thought of being surrounded by buildings. The National Geographic process has taught me valuable lessons about bringing in perspectives to lessons with my students. I appreciate the wealth of resources that National Geographic has opened up to me and hope to apply more of the learning framework and skills perspectives into my classroom.